Hello, my fellow Trollops. I come to you today with the third in the series of my Anthony Trollope read-along that I'm tagging along with Steve Donoghue. I will leave the links down below of to get to watch Steve talk about the chapters that we're about to talk about today, because he's already done that. I just haven't looked at it yet. This is chapters 41 to 60, and so is the book over? As we've seen, if you've been reading along with Anthony Trollope, the Prime Minister is number 5 in the Palliser series. Anthony Trollope has this kind of tendency to suddenly, in the middle of his books, or near somewhere in the, not maybe middle, this is towards the end, but still a good ways off. We still got another 20 chapters, another week to go, just suddenly seeming to wrap up everything. Like in any other novelist, just like, you would save this stuff for the end. This would be the stuff, this would be the dramatic da-da-da-da stuff for the end. But we're like at the end of chapter 16, it's like, okay, what happens next? Okay, well, let's get one into what happened in this one. I mean, there's sort of the two plots. You've got Plantagenet Palliser, Pal, and Glencora, and Plantagenet has, rejected the whole kind of, we're going to schmooze our way through this coalition government. And he's gotten some letters and now nasty articles from Quintus Slide, crusading journalist or internet troll. In the Victorian era, this is, it's funny in this book, in a book nowadays, it would be a corrupt politician and it would be a crusading journalist. Quintus Slide would be the hero of a book like this. But no, in this era, we love Plantagenet. We know he's an honorable man, and that Quintus Slide is just doing this for his own self-glorification and his own kind of things. He does act, but with Trollope, as always, Quintus Slide feels like he's doing the right thing by exposing this corruption that Plantagenet has paid off Ferdinand Lopez for his election expenses because Glencora encouraged him. However, slightly, but I mean, it really only needs to be like a word. That's the way these things work, is you just need a little word, and then suddenly somebody gets into the office that might not necessarily do that. And Palliser had to put his foot down, had to actually make a public statement saying, no, this isn't the case, and, letting the right people know, my support is not here. It got withdrawn. Ferdinand Lopez, perhaps rightly so, actually feels rather betrayed by this, that he was kind of led along the garden path by Glencora, to believe that this was coming from the Prime Minister himself, Plantagenet, Pal. So he gets, Plantagenet does what he feels like is the right thing, and he pays it off. But Quintus Slide, of course, intrepid journalist or internet troll, ferrets out this information and has been publishing all these articles to that effect. And this really, really bothers Plantagenet. And I mean, it's one of those things where, the elder statesman, the Duke of Bungay, who's basically been kind of nursing Plantagenet through it on one side, while Glencora has been doing the social game on the other side to prop him up. He's like, look, Duke of Bungay is like, just ignore it. He's a nothing. He's a buzzing mosquito. He doesn't say those things, but that's basically what he is. But no, this really, really bothers Plantagenet, the Duke of Omnium. So many different names, but he's, it really bothers him. And indeed, he insists it actually get addressed in the House of Commons, with Phineas Finn getting to speak for him because he's a duke. He can't speak in the House of Commons. It gets settled. It gets put down. In the end of the day, yep, I paid it off. He paid it. Phineas Finn's like, he paid it off. He didn't, he did nothing. He didn't influence any elections. In fact, that's the very opposite of what he did. His agents went against his wishes, but he put his foot down on that. And someone calls from the audience, from the things like, oh, who was the agent? Because they all know it's Glencora. And Phineas Finn's like, that's like that's indecent curiosity. And, basically calls him out. And so, if anyone wants to actually come up and speak with their own face to that that charge, let them. But otherwise, that's just morbid curiosity, and you don't need to know that. That's far from the point. That's just wanting to get into all the kind of the juicy details. Ooh, gossip. Nobody stands up, and it's dead. And Quintus Slide himself, accepts. Yes, this is now a dead issue. So that seems to have been, that's plot A there. It's kind of been in some ways settled. I mean, Plantagenet, you do get the sense this is terrible for him being the prime minister. He does not want to be he can't be the glad handling kind of guy who kind of joshes everyone along and compromises. It's like, no, he wants to get stuff done. He doesn't want to be the very kind of small government who just makes everything run nicely so that people can get along with the business of the nation and stuff like that. It's like, it's not what he wants to do. He really feels like he's a failure as, in the top position of the land. It's not where he wanted to be. The decimal system. Come on, let me do the decimal system and be happy. So yeah, that's where that you really, I think you get the strength of Plantagenet and Glencore's relationship together as husband and wife, of like, even when they're like really arguing about stuff, even when, they completely disagree, or when, Plantagenet is like, he's in agony, but he's like, look, I'm not bringing your name into this, no matter how much you think, oh, I could take this. And I mean, I think she could in a way. And, they kiss. And there's something about that of these are people who they can argue, like this is a man and a woman in this society who they can argue about stuff. They can really disagree. One can actually just kind of go against the other one's wishes. And this is the Glencore going against Plantagenet's wishes, most expressly, and getting him into hot water because of it. But they really are partners. And they really bring out the strengths in each other, and they support each other. And it really stands in stark contrast to when we shift over to Ferdinand Lopez and Emily Wharton, now Emily Lopez, of stark contrast, where you have Ferdinand Lopez is somebody who's basically been using Emily, and it's like, you have to obey me. Like, if you're going to be a good wife, you basically have to obey me. And I mean, there's a quote here that I think kind of illustrates Ferdinand Lopez, just his psychology, but also his view of what a good wife is. It cannot be supposed that Ferdinand Lopez at this time, this is at the start of the chapter Lizzie, where he's going to he tries to pump Lizzie Eustace, Lady Eustace, for money. And let's just do a side note of, I really thumbs up. I was worried that they were going to punish Lizzie Eustace, because I feel like they punish her at the end of, is it Phineas Redux? Or no, the Eustace Diamonds, of course. I feel like they punish her at the end of that book. And I was worried that this was going to be further punishment, that she was going to get saddled with Ferdinand Lopez. But no, Lizzie Eustace, she's hung out with enough of these adventurers, scoundrels, and kept her money, and knows when to say no and say, take a hike, honey. Do you think I'm a fool? And indeed, that's what happens to Ferdinand Lopez, which is that's just perfect. But okay, at the start of this chapter of 54 of Lizzie, it cannot be supposed that Ferdinand Lopez at this time was a very happy man. He had, at any rate, once loved his wife, and would have loved her still, could he have trained her to think as he thought, to share his wishes, and to put herself in the same boat with him. As he was wont to describe the unison and sympathy which he required from her. To give him his due, he did not know that he was a villain. When he was exhorting her to get around her father, he was not aware that he was giving her lessons which must shock a well-conditioned girl. He did not understand that everything that she discovered of his moral disposition since her marriage was of a nature to disgust her. And, not understanding all this, he conceived that he was grievously wronged by her, and that she adhered to her father rather than to him. This made him unhappy, and doubly disappointed him. He had neither got the wife that he had expected, nor the fortune. But he still thought that fortune must come if he could only hold on to the wife which he had got. Which is, I think this, there's things, obviously, Trollope is not going to be the wonderfully woke 21st century author. But there's really is a theme in when you see positive relationships in Trollope, it is like Glencora and Palliser, where it's not one person dominating the other person. I think of Lord George Kennedy and his wife, whose of course name is now is completely forgot. It completely slipped my mind. But these men who try and dominate and say basically you have to extinguish yourself if you're going to become my wife and become a non-entity. Just basically become an attachment to myself. Those are the monsters or the villains, as Trollope has said in his books. It's like you need to have. He says like if you're having two people coming together, you're having two people to come together to become something greater, that their strengths feed off each other and hopefully maybe they can minimize their weaknesses. Whereas, Ferdinand Lopez is confused. Why isn't his wife just simply obeying him, quashing all her own, any morals that she has, and just basically taking out his point of view, which is a very immoral, very just everything's for me. I don't care about the law. I don't care about what's right or wrong. It's all what's right for me, and that's the only thing that matters. And anyone who crosses me is obviously is the rotten one. I mean, and that really does feed into how Lopez reacts to stuff. Now, what's happened, of course, is that with the answering of the charge in the House of Commons, it's come out that Ferdinand Lopez asked the prime minister for money, which people are like, that's terrible in of itself. Of your kind of whole, you're being a sore loser, not good cricket there. But also that he's double dipped, that he's indeed asked, he's gotten money from both Palliser and from Abel Wharton for the same thing. So he's exposed himself as completely a rogue, and Everett Wharton, the son, has completely cuts him and has let his club know, and the club is like basically doing procedures to basically try and kick him out, and nobody's talking to him in the club. He's ostracized, and it's just generally known in the further thing, and that's impacting him in the sense of he's was going to get this job going to Guatemala and threatening Mr. Wharton Sr. that like, well, if you don't give me my money, I'm taking your daughter to Guatemala with me. It's like that's the whole if he could only hold on to his wife for a little bit longer, he can get money out of it. And it's one of these things of I was somewhat peeved at Trollope because it was like, oh, you told me earlier that Lopez genuinely loved Emily. You told me that he genuinely loved Emily. And like now he's doing all this stuff that's like, oh, he doesn't care about Emily. It's like, unfortunately, what the whole thing is you get it in that kind of quote that I think is he's deluded, or he's conned himself. He's so locked in his own worldview of everything that's good for me, I love. So I love Emily Wharton because she's going to bring me money and stuff like that. That's his idea of genuine love. So Trollope, you're playing tricks on me. But and you do get into that in this into these chapters as much as I find Ferdinand Lopez an unfair, nasty portrait of an up and coming non-white, non-English person who's emigrated to this country, has been raised in this country, but as like unfair, like you're doing the very most negative kind of version of this character. Whereas like a modern novelist would say, hey, it's somebody who's emigrated to this country, who's worked their way up, is proud that they became, they were a guest at the prime minister's house, has married someone like above their state. He's a rising man. This is an immigration success story. It's like, no, this is shown as darkly as possible as a villain. But Trollope also gives him his own kind of inner life here. And okay, I'm assuming if you've followed along in all this, you accept you either know it or you accept that like massive spoilers ahead is that the end of this book is he figures out I'm not going to get I've failed. Basically I've been playing the dice all this time. I've been gambling and I've been winning, but unfortunately probably coinciding with like the marriage to Emily Wharton. I'm suddenly I can't win at all. Every time I gamble, I lose. I've lost at winning the fortune. I've lost at of Emily Wharton's fortune. I've lost all my business things, and I'm ruined Sexty Parker and his family, and all that side plot. And I've been exposed throughout the country now because of the whole prime minister paying off my election expenses as a complete rogue, as a he's never going to go anywhere. And basically he sees that, yeah, Wharton is probably going to give me a little allowance to go away, and I'm just going to survive on a little allowance for the rest of my life. And there will be no chance of me rising anymore. And you can actually you kind of feel it that there. And indeed, it is a direct callback, it seems to me, to what happened with Glencora's actual true love. If she had married the guy that she had actually wanted to marry, it would have been as ruinous as this. I mean, he wasn't a foreigner, but he was a wastrel. He was a guy who, indeed, in the last sections, she comes upon, and he's at the gambling table, gambling it all and losing it all, and ends up getting a little allowance to live on away from the gambling tables. But that is the only, that's his life. That's going to be his life. And yeah, so Ferdinand Lopez, I guess maybe because he's risen from nothing, it's like he does not want to go back there, I guess. And so, in the end, he goes to Tenaway Junction, and he throws himself in front of a train coming whipping around the corner at 1,000 miles an hour, and is smashed to bloody atoms. And it's just this complete annihilation of this character, which is in itself is an interesting thing, of smashed to bloody atoms. It's like he's it's almost like he's going to be vaporized. There's not going to be anything left, which is an image in itself. It's like, I don't know what that says about an author, that they will do that to a character. It's like, you are here, and then poof, you are gone. You were that vile. You were that reprehensible. I mean, he's a part of the future, as like Quintus Slide. These are people who are going to become a part. These are going to become part of England, a part of the character of England, of an immigrant experience. I don't know what that says about that at this point in a kind of a literary history, that he is vaporized. It's really kind of it's a really interesting thing, and I can't wait to read the next chapters and see how that gets dealt with, I guess. I mean, I guess there's going to be probably a thing of, will Emily, who, man, she really does suffer in these books. She gives birth to a baby, a little male baby, who dies within a couple of days. And there's a really touching scene between her and Mrs. Parker, where you can really see that kind of the sadness there, the deep sadness there. Not to mention just basically how she felt like all this has impacted herself and those around her. And I mean, when Lopez catches her kissing Arthur Fletcher, in a kind of a very kind of romantic scene, like, Lopez, you start wondering what's up with Lopez at that point, because he doesn't this is a guy who was going to horsewhip Arthur Fletcher before for the election, but now he catches her with his wife, kissing his wife, and he's strangely calm, which I guess it's very good of Trollope, of kind of foreshadowing something's up with Lopez. He's already kind of given up the game, but he's like, Lopez asks, like, well, why were you, like, do you love Arthur Fletcher? And before this she said, like, no, I don't love you, Arthur. I don't love you as like as a woman should love a man. And what she says to Lopez in this case is, of course I love him. There are different kinds of love, Ferdinand. There is that which a woman gives to a man when she would fain mate with him. It is the sweet of love of all, if it would only last. And there is another love, which is not given, but which is won, perhaps through long years, by old friends. I have none older than Arthur Fletcher, and none who are dear to me. And there's a kind of a theme through this book where, in a very understated Victorian way, you get the sense that Trollope is saying, through his female, and we're targeting the female characters here for the most part, of like when female characters make bad choices about who to feign to mate with, there's female desire. It's like it's a female desire that we're talking about. I really get that sense of like, she kind of stirs to Lopez because he appears so masterful. He feels like the master, and I have to think that's a sexual desire, whereas the family is kind of looking at things more kind of globally of like, this is the whole life. And I mean, that's the sweetest love of all, if only it would last. And it's like, that heat of sexual desire is great. It's awesome. It's the sweetest love, but she's not going to last through a whole marriage. And we're in a society where if you're going to, that stuff's going to happen. You can't have a one night fling and then go off and then find somebody who you're actually going to have a good solid foundation friendship with. No, you've got to kind of sacrifice that, especially if you're a woman in this society. You see, guys, you do get, this is, I'm sure, the whole thing. Oh, they get to sow their wild oats off, they go off somewhere and sow their wild oats discreetly, but women don't get that chance. Therefore, women can sometimes make bad choices because they are being so suppressed throughout their lives that they find somebody like, wow, I really would like to be with this guy. He is hot. Fernand Lopez, hot. Just, trouble as well. But so, that there's, oh God, I've just gone into female desire in Victorian novels, and it's just interesting how it's a very understated part of these books. There's a lot of it's feminine desire, and maybe there's some maybe implicit kind of criticism here of, we really don't allow the young women in our society to have any of the openings that men do. Not that Trollope would ever mention, young men sowing their wild oats either. So, well, a little bit more, but it's like just very passing. It's these novels you really are kind of looking between the cracks there, which I guess, it's the things in any society which we just take for granted, that are just like, it's the stuff we're soaking in, so we don't even think about it. But that if you're reading back in novels is really enjoyable, because you really notice it, because hey, the world for the most part doesn't work that way anymore. But yes, okay, I'm going to stop here. It's just Fernand Lopez has been a character that I found really interesting, and for him to be smashed to atoms, not even at the very end of this book, is just, it's really, really, really striking to me. So I guess we'll see if indeed if Emily Lopez, the widow, does get to hook up with Arthur Fletcher, if that's a possibility in this society. I don't know if it is, and I'm sure Trollope will take me through that in his very assured way. What's going to happen with my best wishes for Palliser is he gets to go back to the decimal coinage, I guess, that he gets to somehow gracefully step down from being prime minister and gets, demoted to something that he would be actually much more happier doing. You really do get the sense that, that he and Glencora are just going to be this. They're always this solid bunch. They're really they are the great couple in these books. You can see this is Trollope. This is what Trollope sees as sort of the ideal power couple, the ideal functioning relationship in all of these books, I suppose. Glencora is just so awesome. And Phineas, there's Phineas Finn, and there's little echoes, like you get Phineas Finn and Madame Max Goesler, well, Mrs. Finn now. Also, you can see that I want to see a book with them again. But Phineas is also good. And really, I know Steve says it's like with these books, you should be reading them. You could read any one of them out of order, and you would really enjoy them. I think you would, but it is really interesting that it's great if you can hark back to the previous novels. It really enriches that reading. Enriched my reading of this book. Okay, well, I'm off to watch Steve's his third part of the read along, and I'll come back to you with the very final chapters. And Trollope is really good at spinning out stuff. Spinning, not like, oh, I'm just kind of like spinning my wheels and kind of filling in the thing because, well, they hired me for 4 parts, so I got to come up with something for the 4th part, even if there's nothing there. He doesn't do filler. He doesn't do filler. He always comes up with stuff. He always surprises you. And yeah, well, he surprised me at the end of this part. So I'm, okay, I will leave that for later. But in a lesser novelist, I don't know if in a different novelist, Ferdinand Lopez wouldn't have gone quietly, as quietly as this is. He would not. He would not. And it's interesting that this is how Trollope chose him to go. Very interesting. All right. More videos later.